safe streets, vibrant neighborhoods, successful business and commerce. These are things that make a healthy community. We are a diverse community, rural, suburban, urban, a multitude of languages and ethnicities, ages and experiences. We are a collaborative community. Public-private partnerships make us a model community that others want to follow. It is what makes us unique. It is what makes us strong. The employees of Kent County reflect our diversity and seek to serve our communities.
People in this county, in this area, we wrap our arms around each other. We come together to collaborate, to solve problems. We're all working for the good of the whole. And I think that's wonderful. And you can see it. You can see it as you drive around Kent County.
Our impact starts the day a baby is born and a birth certificate is issued, to protecting children from deadly diseases through vaccination, to the public safety and justice provided by law enforcement and the courts, to offering veterans services and caring for the elderly. Every day we work to keep our communities robust.
I think if you are somebody who's interested in serving your community, in building a strong knowledge base and a good group of people to work with, then the county is one of your best employment opportunities out there. It's been completely rewarding in every way I could possibly explain for 26 years, and I feel like I grow every single day still today.
Leading these dedicated employees, our 19-member Board of Commissioners and our County Administrator Controller, along with our elected officials and appointed department directors, placing emphasis on civic involvement, quality housing, vibrant neighborhoods, and strong, solid infrastructure to allow businesses to thrive. Professional, dedicated, collaborative, and innovative.
Behind the scenes, collaboration between foundations, charitable organizations, nonprofits, for-profit businesses, public sector demonstrated through the county, the city of Grand Rapids, the townships, all the cities and the villages in our area. If we don't come together, then we will not have the strength that we have today, and I only hope to build upon that.
Our aim is to make our communities the best they can be. We are involved in exciting development projects, sustainable recycling programs, and creative progressive prevention programming. We partner with elected officials, impacting policy ideas that become great achievements. We seek opportunities to reach out into the community and offer our services to help our residents make Kent County thrive.
Our relationship is solid, both from a staff standpoint at the county level as well as the Board of Commissioners. And they understand what we do and the benefits that we can do for the community, and vice versa. We couldn't do what we do without the help of Kent County.
While most of us are busy running our lives, Kent County's elected officials, administrator controller, and over 1,600 employees are serving the communities where we live our lives, so we can all have a place we are proud to call home. Kent County, its life well run.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Kent County Board of Commissioners meeting. Today's date is Thursday, May 24th, 2018. The time is 8:30 a.m. We'll begin today with roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Commissioner Antor. Here. Vice Chair Bolter. Here. Commissioners Breevy. Here. Bulkowski. Present. Hennessy. Jones. Here. Coleman. Here. Korndike. Present. Mast. Melton. Here. Morgan. Here. Einstein. Here. Skaggs.
Here.
Steck. Here. Talon. Here. Vonk. Here. Voorhees. Present. Womack. Here. Mr. Chair.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 18 members present, 1 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. We will next move to the invocation and pledge, and I will call on Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my privilege this morning to introduce Chaplain David Kennedy. Dr. Kennedy was commissioned as a chaplain in the Army in 1972. After serving as a pastor in Illinois, he and his wife and 3 kids moved to Kent County. While serving as pastor at the Grand Rapids Theological Seminary at Cornerstone, he continued to serve the Army units. He was mobilized in 2003 in support of Operation Enduring Freedom as part of the 85th Training Division for service in the U.S. After serving 1 year, he was transferred to the Pentagon and served as Deputy Joint Staff Chaplain for more than 6 months on active duty. He's retired from the Army Reserve in 2005 at the rank of Colonel. He retired from Cornerstone in 2012, and he's currently the president of the Grand Rapids Army and Navy Club. I present to you Chaplain Kennedy. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind invitation. Let me say that when my family and I moved here in 1980, we found this area to be delightful and have deep appreciation for the work that you all do, and as well as your predecessors. It's enabled us to live and work and raise our family in this area. You may or may not know that yesterday, a very distinguished resident of Kent County was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Chaplain Colonel Herman Kaiser was a chaplain for well over 30 years with the Army, wounded twice in Vietnam, two-time recipient of the Purple Heart, and we had his funeral a few months ago, but yesterday he was interred in Arlington. Very devoted and very active in local areas and local issues as well. Thank you for inviting me to come at this beginning of Memorial Day week. Would invite you to pray with me. Oh Lord, we gather here today as Memorial Day approaches, and the people of our communities will be remembering the courage and sacrifice of so many who have given their lives in our nation's conflicts. Their names are inscribed on our monuments and markers. May they be inscribed in our memories as well. We revere their memory, and we pray for their families. Their lives and their sacrifices are precious to us and to you. We acknowledge that those who have given their lives have not done so for selfish purposes of amassing wealth or land, but to secure the blessings of liberty and peace for all of us and for others. Lord, may we all also honor their memories by following their example of serving others. Lord, we ask that you would wrap your loving arms around all who protect us, whether they wear the military uniforms of our nation or wear the uniforms of our local institutions. Protect them, Lord, as they seek to help us. Lord, we come to you as one nation under God, as we remember the sacrifices of those who have given their lives for our country and our liberty. We pray that you would help all of us live out our values of liberty and justice for all. May you guide today these commissioners of Kent County as they seek to serve our citizens. And may you richly bless our country and the people of this county. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan and Chaplain Kennedy, for that very appropriate invocation. We'll move next to item 5 on our agenda, which are our special order of business items. We have 2 of them today. The first is to hear from a group that goes by the name of First Steps, and Anne Marie Valdez, I believe, is going to begin, or going to be presenting on behalf of this group. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Sawfield, and really thank you to the entire Board of Commissioners for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to present to you this morning. I do have with me the person who's responsible for doing a lot of the research behind our identifying gaps in early childhood in Kent County, Amy Turner-Tolley, and I also have Steve Faber, who will talk to you a little bit about our proposal. And we have a short presentation in terms of PowerPoint, and we also included packets for all of you. And I wanted to make sure you know that we have several letters of support and signatures as well. And I wanted to make sure that I pointed out in the packets that we have a letter from the Kent ISD supporting this proposal, also from AAA West Michigan, the folks that coordinate the senior millage. They have also supported our proposal. And we have a letter from Talent 2025 from the business community. So as we get started with the PowerPoint, I wanted to mention that there are 3 important pieces for First Steps and this proposal. So in 2000, the Kent County Prevention Initiative began, and in more recent years, First Steps has been identified as one of the entities that does evaluation for that initiative, and we have shown very positive results. In 2003, the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council formed the Early Childhood Committee, and the Early Childhood Committee developed into the governance structure that became First Steps Kent. Many of the First Steps Kent Board of Commissioners are here in attendance today, and what I'd like to mention is First Steps Kent was formed intentionally bipartisan by both Doug DeVos and Kate Pugh Walters, so that we could focus on early childhood and the needs in our county. I also wanted to mention that we are leading the way, Kent County is, in terms of local leadership and statewide early childhood initiatives. We've been selected as one of 10 communities in National Early Childhood Learning Networks, and most recently, we were selected as one of 6 early childhood prototype communities in a nationwide Pritzker Children's Initiative. Early childhood is a community priority. We have a community plan that was contributed to by many stakeholders throughout the county. So we have partnerships of parents, public and private sector service providers, healthcare providers, educators, county government, business leaders, faith leaders, and philanthropic leaders. The time is now, and at this point, I would like to bring up Steve Faber to talk to you about our proposal. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Steve Faber. I work with Byron Memphis Communications. We've been working with First Steps since last fall as they prepare for this proposal before you. As many of you will recall, the idea of an early childhood millage was presented to the millage subcommittee in 2016. First Steps determined at that time that it was best to wait to go through this formal county process. So for the past 2 years, First Steps has been working on several fronts to prepare for the millage process and the ballot. A significant amount of work has gone into educating the broader community about the importance of early childhood development in our community. So you've likely seen the billboards, the banners, the creative First Steps around the community building awareness about early childhood development. We've recently hosted 2 significant conferences with the Early Childhood Summit last fall, and then most recently the Ready by 5 conference, which a couple of you were able to attend, where we were bringing together experts from across the nation that come from communities that have dedicated, stable funding for early childhood, to hear from them, hear about the impact and success of those efforts, and what we can learn here locally. We've also been listening to community partners, parents, and voters from across the county, and we're seeing that there is interest and enthusiasm for this proposal. We also completed the gap analysis to better understand how many of our children are being served now and what it would take to make sure all children have support they need and to be school ready. The gap analysis should be in your packet, and we really encourage you to dig into that and go through that as it identifies the need and really the areas that we're looking to address with this proposal. In terms of meeting the need, we believe that every child in Kent County deserves to be healthy and ready to learn by kindergarten, and right now thousands of kids are slipping through the cracks. Research shows that investing in early childhood programs saves money in the long term and produces a return in the form of better outcomes for health, education, and employment. That's why so many members of our community are voicing support for this proposal. They know that community-based programs, like we have in Kent County, are proven to work. However, federal, state, and private funds are not sufficient to fill the gap and meaningfully move that needle. Our community lacks the stable, local, dedicated funds to support early childhood development and health. Just briefly on the proposal itself, what we are proposing and what we have brought before the millage subcommittee and been working through with them for, I think, 4 meetings now, is 0.5 mils for 7 years, and we'd like this to appear on the November 6, 2018 ballot. In a minute, Amy and Anne-Marie will walk through the proposal structure and the allocation of the annual estimated $10 million per year that would be brought in through this millage. But in a nutshell, the proposal would cost the average homeowner of a $150,000 home about $37.50 per year. Amy's now going to walk through the proposed allocation of funds and how that will benefit children and families across Kent County. Thank you.
So the early childhood proposal would fill many, I'm much shorter than Steve, would fill many of the most pressing needs identified in the gap analysis. As we developed this proposal, we focused on two primary criteria. The most important, what will make an immediate significant impact on improving the health and school readiness of young children, and also what has no other identified source of sustainable funding. This proposal would greatly increase the number of families and children served by effective quality providers throughout our community. I'm going to take a minute now to walk through the types of services that would be supported in this millage, beginning with navigation of health and child development services. Right now, we know that we are not reaching some of the families in our community who are most in need of support. This develops a system to work with parents prenatally or after the birth of their child to identify their needs and connect them to services and resources. The community has done this in a pilot capacity but needs to bring it to scale and sustain it. This navigation support is particularly important in rural areas of Kent County where families may not be as knowledgeable or familiar with what services are available. Next, developmental screenings. We currently have the capacity in the community to regularly, consistently screen about 1/4, 25% of young children. But we want to ensure that all children in our community have regular screenings to identify any delays, disabilities, or social emotional difficulties. Families who live in Lowell or Comstock Park, Cedar Springs, the city of Grand Rapids, regardless of where you live in Kent County, need access to screenings, information about child development, and then support if the screening finds that something isn't quite right. Dedicated local funding would ensure that many, many, many more children, thousands more, are being screened on a regular and consistent basis. Next, we have support for families and parenting education. And these are programs that support and empower parents, not replace them. They're programs that help parents provide the best start possible for their children. Largely here, we're talking about home visiting services. So someone who lives in Byron Center or Kentwood or Sparta would have a nurse or parent educator come to their home and help them nurture their child's development, build strong parent-child attachment, work on early literacy and improving health outcomes. Our community has very effective evidence-based home visiting services, including some that you have supported, and we are very grateful for that, for almost the last 20 years as part of the Kent County Prevention Initiative. Currently, though, in our community, we only have the funding to serve fewer than half of eligible children with home visiting services, or those who we know need that support. A successful millage would change that. And I do want to share one other note about home visiting. Yesterday, several of us were in Lansing at a meeting at Public Sector Consultants that was talking about early childhood. Home visiting was described as the single most evidence-based public policy we have. More is known about the effectiveness and long-term benefits of home visiting than just about anything else we have out there. So I thought that was pretty strong support for that. Community-based early learning experiences. These are play and learn groups in community centers or churches. We are not talking about formal preschool. These are more informal programs in community settings. Parents and other caregivers like grandparents or neighborhood child care providers would attend these programs with the children in their care. Once they're there, early childhood educators model for them how they can nurture early language and literacy and social emotional skills, those things that research tells us are critical to a child's success in school and then their long-term success as an adult. Again, the community has piloted this program very successfully, but needs to be able to bring it to scale in all underserved areas of Kent County. Finally, dedicated funding would allow us to develop the data, evaluation, and quality improvement mechanisms that we know are so important to ensure the accountability and effectiveness across the system. This would assure the most effective use of millage dollars, but would also guarantee that all other public and private dollars dedicated to services for children birth to 5 are being used effectively. We can take a quick look here at the proposed allocation of funding. We've done some preliminary work in this area to identify how money could be spent, but we recognize that this ultimately likely will be up to an allocation committee. We also provided ranges, allowing for some discretion with the committee and also recognizing that needs and priorities may shift over time. These proposed allocations are based on the needs and costs of services that were identified in the gap analysis. The largest chunk of funding would go to parenting, education, and support. Again, that's primarily home visiting, and that's a more intensive and slightly more costly service. Navigation, developmental screenings, and community-based early learning programs would all receive roughly equal amounts of funding, and then the remaining revenue generated would go toward the data, evaluation, quality improvement, and administration of the millage funds. Anne Marie?
Thank you, Amy. Much of what Amy explained and what we want to put your focus on is this handout that I think is in all of your packets. And it's important to note that our proposed structure for the millage is based on an exploratory task force over several months. We looked at communities across the country, especially counties similar in size to Kent County, to see how they used dedicated funding in terms of either a millage, a levy, some type of tax dedicated funding. The proposed structure, we also brought in representatives from AAA West Michigan to learn about their structure, and we believe one of the best models is modeled after the successful senior millage. And we've learned much from them. They've put out a support letter, which is also in your packet, and all the millage dollars will be reported and will go through an independent financial audit every year. So bringing your attention back to the handout, we did give examples of performance indicators, and many of these indicators are based on what we have learned from other communities who are doing this similar early childhood work. And I'd like to point out that inside the handout, we really lay out what the funds would be used for and how many children, indicated in bold to the right, would be affected by millage dollars and circumstances being improved. So the reason this is important is that research shows children who start ahead stay ahead. The majority of a child's brain develops by his or her third birthday. Early learning experiences build a strong social, emotional, and intellectual foundation. A speech or hearing impairment, a learning disability, autism, or disease can happen to anyone. Early identification and support need to be available to everyone. So in terms of measurable success, examples of performance indicators which are highlighted on the handout, we would see an 8% increase in the percent of expectant mothers engaged in prenatal health care. And we are seeing indicators that the health of a mom, the earliest intervention for young children, really helps later on as they go through preparing for kindergarten and later on for third grade reading. And this is really important because we're seeing as a state that we are not anywhere near where we should be in proficiency for third grade reading. 8% increase in percent of young children up to date on well child visits, 20% increase in the percentage of young children with completed developmental screenings, increase in percentage of children who are school ready as measured by the kindergarten entry observation, which is really going to start in the coming year in 2018 in the fall. And we see decrease in K through 12th grade repetition and special education costs, and that's where the cost savings really come in for this proposal that we have before you. So we can move the needle. Early childhood services in Kent County are working. This will greatly increase the number of children and families who benefit from them. I want to thank you and then open it up for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. We'll allow some questions here now. I was going to say, as a matter of logistics, the millage subcommittee is obviously looking at this, chaired by Commissioner Steck, and I believe you have your next and possibly final meeting on June 5th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so then that will come back to this board for a vote, depending on what their recommendation is. So now is an opportunity to ask some questions that you might have on this. So we'll begin with Commissioner Korndike.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this goes to Commissioner Steck or to someone at the podium. You mentioned our prevention initiative. We spent about $1.6 million on that. this going to replace that or not? The only reason I asked that question is because when we did the millage for the zoo, we replaced some dollars. So is that part of the plan or not part of the plan?
Yes, Commissioner Korndike, thank you so much for that question, because we've really been looking into that. And the Prevention Initiative has two pieces that do pay for early childhood services. And I think the total for that is $700,000 of the 1.6 that you mentioned. And we would consider whatever the county suggests for us to do in terms of not necessarily replacing, but enhancing those programs and what is going on with them currently.
Okay. And then a quick follow-up on page 3 of your presentation, the first screen. It says thousands of Kent County children will be effective. How many thousands are you talking about?
Yeah.
And if I look at the front here, it says half. I mean,
Yes, and when we
is
talk
that the number that you're looking at?
When we talk about the numbers of children under age 5, so on the proposal, right in the middle, under the
Right, I
blue
see
heading.
that.
Yep.
So then would this program affect the 20,000? Because then I open it up and start reading, and the numbers of screenings and so forth don't even come close to that. So, I mean, what is the goal as far as how many children are you planning to
Well, and that
involve?
depends in part in how an allocation committee decides to spend the money.
Okay.
If an allocation committee, our recommendation at this point would be developmental screenings is a universal program. And our recommendation at this point is that we would make sure that we have developmental screenings available to all families in Kent County. So what we're suggesting here is that we would reach another 20,000 potentially through this, recognizing that not every family is going to choose to participate. Currently, we're reaching about 10,000, I think, with developmental screenings. And so we're hoping that we can get to at least 75% of all kids with developmental screenings. If you go through the gap analysis, in each service area, we have set a target population that we would like to reach in the community, not necessarily just through millage support, but through other support. And that is never 100% of the population. We take a subset based on need, and then we take a subset of that population, in some cases based on state standards, in some cases based on the experience of providers locally, assuming maybe 60% of the eligible population wants to participate, or 50%, or 85%, depending on the particular type of service and how intensive it is. But we do believe that we can reach another 20,000 children at least through this proposal, through developmental screenings and some of the other programs.
And then my final question, if I may, is our senior millage, we have AAA as our administrator, and we're pretty hard on them to make sure their administrative cost stays low. Is that a goal of this group as well?
Yes, and I believe what we have
I
in
mean,
here.
I think we require under 10%, if I'm right. Wait a minute.
And what we have proposed in here is.
4.5%, okay.
What we have in here is very much in line with the senior millage. It's about 5%.
Okay.
So we did that intentionally in line with what the senior millage does.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Chair. So when I look at this, one of the areas that I would like to bring up for further discussion as you go into more meetings is the time frame. The time frame of 7 years is long. It concerns me to go to the voters and ask for that 7-year time frame. So I just want to encourage you as you continue to have conversations with our subcommittee to give that some additional thought. That's my comment. I'm not looking for any discussion back. I know there's another subcommittee meeting coming up, and I know we have our process for that, but my thought for you is to really give that some additional conversation in your next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Bolkowski.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your work on this. To quickly follow up on Commissioner Korndike's questioning, is there an identified administrator for the funds or administrative agency?
Thank you. We have proposed that First Steps be considered as a fiduciary. We know there will be an RFP process to determine that, but we really do believe that we could model it after AAA West Michigan's fiduciary model, and would be open to looking at that further.
All right.
If you look in the actual proposal that we submitted to the county in February, which I believe is in the packet, that's outlined. There are several questions asking about that, and that's all outlined in there.
All right, and then a more substantive question. One thing that I'm not seeing enough of, we did a lot of work over the last 2 years related primarily to fathers and their connectivity to support obligations and the negative aspects of that if they don't, in the sense of warrants and sheriffs and things like that. I'm not hearing enough about fathers in this opportunity. Definitely the health of the child and the health of the mother. Is there enough thought in that area, and especially that flexibility in the choosing of services in the process?
Really great question. And I know Amy mentioned that there's a big piece of this that says we want to support parents, not replace them. But we do work with the Great Start Collaborative, and they do a fatherhood initiative. And we have really brought to the forefront parent engagement, how we can support parents, including fathers. And both Candace Cowling from Family Futures, who is in attendance today, and myself, we are co-chair the Home Visiting Provider Network. And we have met with the district attorney and other entities in law enforcement to really help work through home visiting some of the pieces that you've just mentioned in terms of fatherhood, responsibility, and warrants, and how to do that in a more effective way. And they actually are streamlining that process and making it work much better. Instead of catching a father years down the line when the costs are thousands of dollars, they're intervening early so that they can work out a payment plan. And we have been working closely with the law enforcement entities who are working on that project right now.
Commissioner Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair Sawfield. Thank you for your presentation. I see it as a new phase in education and concerned why hasn't the education community picked this up, either through the ISD or some other entity. But, to set up a new organization, I so appreciate in our senior millage in Kent County, we have such great oversight by commissioners, many of us who have served at one time or another in that presentation and oversight. But I just concerned why doesn't the ISD step up and say, yeah, this is part of education. It's not extension on that end, but it's going an extension on the beginning. And so.
Well, and the ISD partners closely with us on this, but this actually, First Steps isn't a new entity, and this isn't a new realm for the county. We were birthed out of the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council that recognized 20 years ago, looking at the brain research, looking at the economic research, looking at all the data that's out there, that if we're going to move the needle, it isn't just through the education system, it's through the whole child, and we have to start far before the K-12 system gets involved. So looking at the health outcomes, looking at the early childhood development, child attachment, child-parent attachment, reducing cases of abuse and neglect. While that's certainly in the interest of the school system, working with infants and toddlers isn't necessarily the realm of the K-12 school system. And so we work very closely with them, but more of this falls much in line with what the county services the county already provides, and services provided by private sector providers that work with the county and with other entities. This is really focused more on early childhood development, health, family support, that sort of thing.
I don't know if this is the time to ask the question of what effect it would have on county entities now. Are we going to be replacing some? Are we going to be saving money or reducing the budgets of entities that are now having to provide some? Maybe it's too early for that, or maybe you have an idea. What will be the impact on the entities now meeting these needs?
Another important question, thank you. And what we see that there are really no other funding streams that cover the items that we have outlined in our proposal. What we're seeing is this can only help. The gap is very wide. In our gap findings, we know that there are huge gaps in many of the categories. So we can look at home visiting as one. We can look at preschool, which we're very fortunate to have some funding for 4-year-old preschool. But when we look at the entire gap, There's no other funding stream that would cover these, and so it wouldn't replace anything. It would be working together. And when we talk about the cost savings later on, in talking to the Michigan Department of Education, learning that the costliest pieces for us later on are really grade repetition, developmental kindergarten, and special education costs. Sometimes early intervention is going to make sure that those costs are really lessened and that those issues don't continue far on into school. And the cost savings come later.
Vice Chair Bolter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of questions, and I know we're going to meet, so we're not belaboring this for another hour. You know, I'm a mother. I have 2 children. I grew up in a very disadvantaged area, so I can appreciate all the services we have in Kent County. I also have a very kind of unique perspective in that I work for a large health system. I worked in the legislature for 18 years and worked on the DHHS budget, so I know a lot of the programs that are available at the state. And what I'm trying to kind of sort out in my head is we have a lot of programs available. We do in-home visits in Kent County. We have a lot of services that provide that already. Very effectively. Our own health department does it. You know, Medicaid expansion, increased access for all these disadvantaged children to get some of these, you know, primary care visits, get them into their pediatrician earlier, get these screenings done. So a lot of this analysis, I'm wondering, A, is it previous to some of these things, and then how are these kids still slipping through the cracks with some of the programs that are already available?
The gap analysis was done after the implementation of the Affordable Care Act and the increased Medicaid expansion. Number one, we don't have the capacity in the community to serve everybody who is eligible for services or who would really benefit from services. We have various funding streams, and you're right, we have excellent programs that are working very effectively, but most of them are currently working at capacity or don't have the capacity to serve the additional families who need to be served. The other piece of this that I think is critically important, and we spoke about this at the Millage Subcommittee, Dr. Nkeche Eze from the Early Learning Neighborhood Collaborative talked about this, that the ELNC has gotten really, really, really great outcomes with their programs because they've taken that additional step of working really closely with parents and empowering parents and figuring out what are the barriers for these families to get their children to the kinds of services they need. And that's something that we have not had the dedicated funds in our community to do across the board. We've had it in isolated pockets, but we haven't had it across the board. And so families will get much better outcomes out of the services that are available if we can work closely with them to navigate the system and remove barriers.
Okay, follow-up question.
Go ahead.
I also don't necessarily think that poverty is necessarily an indicator that all these children are going to need in-home visits. You know, I'm thinking about my own district and thinking about when I go door to door. I don't know how many people are going to access or want access to in-home visits. Just because you are, you know, maybe a more economically disadvantaged family doesn't mean you automatically want or need these services. And then, so my last question, and I'll try to bring more to you, is this is the gap analysis, correct?
No.
Okay, because this gap analysis talks about 0 to 2
Yep.
daycare needs in the city, and this gap analysis is what you're looking at.
This
then?
is the gap
Okay.
analysis that we put together
Okay.
for all of Kent County.
Okay,
And-
and this is based on poverty rates, basically.
Well, we took a population, for our definition of the economically disadvantaged population, we used 200% of the federal poverty level,
Okay.
which closely lines up to the eligibility for free and reduced lunch in the K-12 school system, so that we were looking pretty closely with the 0 to 5 population and the K-12 population. But we completely agree with you that not all families who are economically disadvantaged want or need these services. So if you go through in the gap analysis, and there's a much more detailed, like 80-page analysis on our website that includes the full report, and we're happy to get that to you as well. But we explain how we determine the target population for each service. So for home visiting in particular, Offhand, I'm not remembering what the numbers are, but we initially took the economically disadvantaged population, and then we took a subset of that population based on enrollment numbers and some targets set by the state. This is the number of children we'd like to reach, and that's our goal. Our goal is not 100% of all kids or 100% of economically disadvantaged kids for a more intensive service like home visiting. For developmental screening, our goal is everyone.
And then lastly, some of your performance indicators, you've got, I assume it's this box here. I want to know, is that based on just your specific programs, or is that based on all programs in Kent County that are offered that do similar service? And then can we get a list by program? You know, you've been doing this a while, you've been doing this a long time. I'm certain you've benchmarked these to see where we've moved the needle with a lot of these programs, and I'm wondering if we can get that based on, you know, at a later date, based on program and number of kids served. Thank you.
Commissioner Melton?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, do you have more of these? I did not receive one, and I know neither did Commissioner Womack. He's been looking through his packet. Thank you. Here, and I've got Commissioner Breves, if you have one more. You can keep that. Do you want one more?
Okay. I have one.
Oh, she has a second one, so never mind. Okay. Actually, my comment is more just a carryover from a breakfast that I went to on Mondays. A couple other commissioners were there, legislators in literacy, and actually very similar focus. In fact, almost the exact focus was early childhood special, not my daughter teaches special education, early childhood education, and how can we do this? And it was very interesting, and I don't know how much you have done to look into some of the things that they've incorporated too. They have partnered with Grand Valley University, and the whole way that Grand Valley is doing a portion of their education in the classroom, student teaching, there's the word, and bringing them into the classroom is completely changed from being the adjunct teacher to what are we teaching, not only math and science and whatever, but what are we modeling, what are we bringing forward, and then developing these relationships with the families in the classroom that have younger children. So it was, I found to be very fascinating. I am a huge proponent of early childhood education because there is such a huge difference from when my child went to school and the child down the street whose parents are from Bosnia and just came off out of war-torn area and don't know any English. The disadvantage is huge, and I live in Kentwood, so we have several languages, which is another huge obstacle. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to offer a couple observations and perhaps get some reflection on that from some of the presenters. I've had the opportunity in my professional life to have been pretty immersed in this early childhood stuff. And what I recognize when I look at this inside piece here is that, as Commissioner Bolter suggested, we do have a lot of resources in this community, and one of the big needs that we have is enabling families to navigate those resources. And that's what I really learned and observed in my past work life, is how difficult that can be, and the lack of support for families to navigate those resources and get connected to them. And one of the ways that you can do that, I was also privileged to be involved with the largest developmental screening program in this county. That is something that cuts across all economic backgrounds. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you can have a child with a developmental delay that you just don't recognize, but these screenings can really help identify those and get needed resources to families, no matter what your income level or wealth. And there's just not enough resources to be able to do those screenings. It's not a thing that is part of our government or hospital resources that are available to families. That's a huge need. The other observation about this proposal is I really appreciate the emphasis on evaluation. We had that as part of our prevention initiative, and that's really important to be able to see how is this investment doing in our community, and I'm so appreciative of seeing that as part of the proposal. So I don't know if there's any reflections on any of those pieces, but just some observations from my past. Thank you.
I don't see any, so we'll move to the next commissioner, which is Commissioner Antor.
Thank you, Chair. I remember 30-some years ago probably, when we had our first child, we weren't really ready financially. But as soon as we had our little girl, it just became an instinctive thing. We kind of figured out how to provide for her. We had help at the hospital. We had help all along the way with people telling us what we need to do next. You learn, and there was always somebody there. And it just seems like there's a disconnect here somehow. What happened to parents' instincts in a lot of cases who have the money and the capital to take care of their kids the proper way? What are we missing? What happened to those instincts? We talk about screenings. I've seen cases where kids have been screened and misdiagnosed, where parents said, he doesn't need this ADHD medicine according to what you're telling us. I'm going to take them out of this school and get them to a different school where they thrive. So those screenings aren't always necessarily effective. Sometimes kids just act a certain way because they're kids. I do see the need for high-risk kids, especially if they're involved with any type of CPS complaints. There'd be a high-risk pool. Some foster children, some single-parent children, potentially some poverty-level families. I know there is a lot of stuff out there, including My Child, insurance. I think there are a lot of resources. I'm just wondering, again, what are these parents missing? Is there lack of education on the parents' part? Or when do the instincts kick in to seek help that may already be out there? And are we just kind of overdoing what we already have for people out there? And are we pointing them towards existing services they may be missing? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. What we see as we do this work, and many of the points you brought up are well taken, but there are stressors on parents, and you actually mentioned many of the individual items that would be very important. You mentioned foster care and child abuse. Those pieces are important to this because we're looking at every cross-section rather than just one. And sometimes in the example that you gave with your own family, when there is stability in a household, and we're talking about economic security or even without challenges or barriers of transportation or food, those types of things. And we see them across the county in terms of poverty and like middle income and higher income. But what we are trying to do is identify where the gaps are, and those go across the county. And when you start to look at where services are lacking or where parents can't access them, that's what we're talking about, just those supports. And you also mentioned single-parent households. It's important to make sure that we're supporting those families because, and I don't mean financially, I mean so that they can navigate the services, because those children deserve those opportunities, just like every child does.
And if I could just follow up real close. I'd like to do everything we can do. It's just sometimes I see people, they have self-created hardships, and sometimes this looks like we're rewarding bad behavior. And that's the part where we got to take care of the kids, but we got to make parents more responsible. A lot of times they're just dropping the ball because kids are no longer. It was always my top priority, even though we didn't have the money when we started. We made sure that we took care of the kids, made sure they had insurance any way we could, before we moved on to the fun stuff. So, thank you.
Thank you. And many of the communities we researched are really finding that this is an effective piece, is the parent engagement piece. It's not costly, but it's very effective to make sure that you're bringing in family and parent engagement so that children do benefit.
Thank you.
That's where the research and home visiting really comes in. That there's so much evidence out there about its effectiveness, and it's because it's the multi-generation approach. It's working with the parent and working with the child.
Commissioner Womack.
Yes, thank you very much. Once the issue is identified, picking up on what Commissioner Antor brought up, once an issue is identified with a parent or a family on programs that can help with the child, what leverage do we have to make, coerce, or gain the participation of the parent to have that child in those programs or receive those services? Is there any leverage, or is this just an option that we present at the door and go to the next door?
Another great question. Thank you, Commissioner Womack. We have been enlisted by the county to do the evaluation for the prevention initiative. And one of the things we found when we did evaluation was really what was going on when a parent or a mom declined services for home visiting. And what we learned is really techniques and mechanisms that help us enhance that. And some of it is, and I believe it was Commissioner Bolter who mentioned, you know, there are families that don't want someone coming into their home, or there might be some stigma involved. But what we're learning through our evaluation, that there are techniques, and it's really word of mouth, where a parent is saying, hey, they came in and they helped me and they helped my child, and you should use this service. That was actually one of the most effective ways, rather than someone coming out, you know, in a more authoritative way and saying, you know, this is what you need to do. So we're learning from other communities and from our own community through evaluation, what are the best techniques for that.
Okay. Will there be new job positions, or will it totally be relying on community partners? I saw something about financing some of the community partners that are there doing that work already. Or will there be new job positions, and how many new job positions do you estimate to put boots on the ground? We're talking like 20 townships and cities.
That's a great question, and I believe there will be new jobs associated with this millage proposal. And the other thing that I don't think we emphasized enough today is that not only is there a two-generation approach, but there's a workforce development piece here that is so important. And training the workforce of the future is really what this is about, because what we're seeing, and with the business community supporting this proposal, is that we don't have a viable workforce right now, and we need to build that with our youngest.
Okay, and when it comes to marketing this, you know, after sitting on the board a year and a half here and seeing all the great programs we do have in Kent County, I do notice that when it comes to marketing in the minority area, there's just no marketing of, I say 90% of programs that I've seen. There's not going to be any ad in LaVos for our Hispanic brothers and sisters. There's nothing going to be in the Times, and there's some great programs, but I see zilch in marketing when it comes to those communities. Does this program plan to do any marketing? Because boots on the ground is going to hit some doors, but, you know, marketing could definitely get more parents involved with these programs.
We agree, and we would certainly enhance our marketing across the county.
Thank you very much.
Final question on my list, Commissioner Morgan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just what I'm hearing out there, good morning. What I'm hearing out there is some of the questions revolve around with this, is the county blurring the lines between the responsibilities of the education, schools education, and what the county's function should be. And I'm wondering, with that, if the proper venue to this could be the Kent Intermediate School District or something like that to handle this sort of stuff.
You know, Steve may want to add something here. We looked at that. Is the most appropriate place the county, or is the most appropriate place the ISD? The reality is that the services that this would support and enhance and increase the capacity of are largely, many of them are services that currently the county either provides through the health department or invests in those types of services. The county is heavily invested in home visiting. This isn't focused on education as we think of education. It isn't adding preschool slots. It's focused on early learning that will benefit students once they enter the K-12 system, but it's really the health and development of the child, and it's services that are much more closely aligned to those sorts of things that the county has already committed to.
I would just add as well, if you look at the gap analysis, you'll see a breakdown of really within this space of 0 to 5. We understand that that's a complicated space for everybody to understand because there's a lot of different community programs. There is pre-K, there's daycare, there's all these other things that are wrapped up in there, and there isn't a single group in our county that's solely responsible for that. And so as you continue to evaluate this proposal and work through it, you really do start to pull apart all the different aspects of what it takes to make sure that a child is ready to learn. We will say one other thing that's come up frequently in the millage subcommittee is other resources. What is the role of the state? What is the role of the federal government, et cetera, and the private sector? And what we are seeing, again, is there are, in the budgets that are being proposed currently, there continues to be some resources for those preschool, fourth grade, or 4-year-old, 3-year-old. We believe there are other avenues really to look at some of the what's happening in terms of childcare. So what we've done here is really tried to target these specific resources, again, to what Amy said, to the things that really aren't going to have those funds available, that really are within the wheelhouse of the county, and really focus on the health and development of a child to prepare them to learn.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting today. I greatly appreciate that. We have greatly exceeded our normal time allotment, but I did that intentionally, knowing that this is coming back to the board for a vote following the subcommittee's recommendation. I also suspect there's other questions that are still out there by commissioners, and I would encourage you to attend the millage subcommittee meeting on June 5th, or even, I'm sure you're happy to take questions from any commissioners that have additional questions. It is important, obviously, that we get our questions answered. So, again, thank you, and appreciate it. I see many members of your board that are here today, and I appreciate that showing as well. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is our financial overview, and that's going to be presented by our Fiscal Service Director, Steve Duarte. So, Steve, we are ready for that report. I don't see Steve. Oh, did he hear me? No. This is the most telling. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Commissioner. All of you should have received the financial overview in your package, and I will be going over it. But I want to give you a little bit of background on the financial overview before we start. Obviously, the financial overview is a significant portion of the presentation that we do to the rating agencies every year in New York. The data in that report is out March 31st, 2018. I assure you, some of those numbers, if not all those numbers, have changed in varying degrees since we put out that report. So please remember that. I want to say that the rating agencies are interested in a broad range of information. Some examples are they're interested in trends, property taxes, household income, employment, liquidity of the county, our ability to make payment, and financial policies, and whether we adhere to our financial policy. Those are some examples of the things they like to talk about and see. So I'm going to go over this and highlight some of the things that I highlight for the rating agencies in New York. So if we could start on page 12. I would like
Steve,
to,
would you move your microphone a little closer? You're a little hard to hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Thank you for telling me.
Thank you.
If we could turn to page 12, I will start with the labor force distribution by industry. Okay, I think the most significant thing of this is almost without exception, we've had 4 consecutive years of growth in employment. And if you look down the left side and look at some of the major ones, manufacturing change over 4 years is 14.4%. Education and health services, 12.6%. Leisure and hospitality, 17%. And natural resources, mining and construction, 30.2%. And I think the most important statistic here is that total non-farm employment over those 4 years went up with 55,800 jobs, or 11.3%. So that showed the basis that employment is strong in the MSA area, and without a doubt, looked good for us. If we could turn to page 15. On page 15 at the top, we start talking about stake equalized and taxable valuation, okay? One of the measures they like to use to compare us against the other communities is called full value at CV. And for us, that's slightly over $54 billion. And we divide it by the population for this one. The population for 2016 was 642,173. When you do that, it says our full value per capita SEV is 84,500. Strong, but probably not the strongest of all the AAAs that we are compared to. If you move down to a little bit closer to the middle of the table, you have a table that says SEV and taxable value history. If you look at that table and go to the fourth column, SEV change from the prior year. For 2018, we went up 4.7% for SEV, and one column over for 2018, we went up 4.8% for taxable value. Now, that was kind of an unusual thing, but that would be a combination of strong net new construction and the pop-up from the sale of property within Kent County. The other part, if you were expecting a number to be a little higher on that, we made a change this year. Typically, we use a 24-month market study for the study of sales in the real estate area. When we were on the downtrend, there was an agreement made with the state and the assessors that we would move that period to a 24-month ending period, 9/30 of the year. And what that did is gave the taxpayers the advantage of having the latest sales data when it was on the downslide. This year, by agreement, we have moved it back to March 31st, okay? That now means the 24-month period, market period has been moved back. And the result of that is that because we did that this year, the first year, there's only 6 months of additional new sales data going into it. So you would expect that the last 6 months in a strong housing economy and strong sales would have been higher. So it's a little bit suppressed because of that change in there. We would expect it to now, in the next year, there'll be 18 months worth of new sales data, so you'll see some change there. I think the important thing is to also notice that we bottomed out in 2013. As you can see, in 2013, we had 0% change in the SEV and a negative 0.1%, 0.1%, excuse me, for taxable value. Since that point, we've had five years of growth, which is good for us. We're starting to see the turnaround and climb back up. The property tax growth margin, how much we're below, taxable value is below SEV. If you look at that chart, that table graphically, it will show that we have a property tax growth margin of about 15.64%. And as you can see, that green line coming right down around the 85% on the graphic to show you we have some growth here. Just to hit a few highlights on the taxable value, residential taxable value grew by 4.81%. Commercial taxable value grew by 5.27%. Industrial grew by 4.83%. And agriculture, which is a smaller portion of our overall tax base, grew at about 5% for taxable value. Any question on the taxable value issues? With that, let's turn to page 18, if you would. There's a table on page 18, property tax collection history. One of the things that the rating agencies are interested in is, since we're pledging the collection of these taxes as the ability to repay the notes that we're issuing, what is your history? How do you collect? How much do you collect? As you can see, for 2017, at the March 1st of the year following the levy, we're at column 3, we're at 93.81%. But more importantly, from my point of view, is the consistency of that collection. You will see that we're always between the high 92s, 92.74 in 11, to as high as 94% in 2013. So we got a very tight pattern, very consistent history of what we collect by the March 1st following the year. The next column on the right, fourth column, collections to March 1 of 2018. That's looking historically, where do we stand with all these issues? As you can see, virtually, by looking at 2016, where we're 99.67% collected, by historical standards, we're almost to 100% every year by the time we get to that first year following the tax levy. Again, good, strong collection history. That's what they like to see. That is a very strong indicator that we can pay for the revenues, and we will not have to use our full faith and credit as a payment vehicle to handle these taxes. Turn to pages 20 and 21. At the top, we have the constitutional debt limit, and we have a statement of legal debt. And we're allowed to issue up to 10% of our SEV in debt. Excuse me, yes, we are. Let me restate that. So, for purpose of this, the 2018 SEV value is $27.1 billion. We are allowed to issue up to 10% of that SEV, or $2.7 billion in debt, if we so choose. I would recommend it, but.
Hey, Steve?
Yes, sir.
On that note, does that include the $147 million of the airport bonding?
Yes, that would be counted against us.
So if we took that,
Yeah.
okay.
And so if you look at that number is reflected in the debt outstanding, $357 million. So that's what we've issued. So when you subtract that from our ability to issue, we could issue another $2.3, $2.4 billion in debt if we so chose. Our debt outstanding as a percentage of SEV is about 1.3%. I've been asked in the past, how does that compare to other communities? Moderate, there are some less, some more. So I would consider we're in a moderate position at this point. I would indicate that the first time I went for Kent County to New York, at that point we had about $511 million outstanding. So we've paid down a significant portion of our debt over those years. If you move down to the debt statement that gives the composition of what that debt is, so in the middle of this table that we have, the debt statement, look at the line that says total direct debt, and then I will walk down the various columns. Our gross debt, as is shown up above, is $357 million. Of that, if you move to the next column, the self-supporting debt, or portion of debt directly paid by benefited municipalities, is about $204 million. These are things such as the notes and other things, the airport revenues paying, the airport bonds, all that type of stuff. If you look across from there, that would mean about 57.21% of our debt is self-supporting. The rest is related to us paying directly. So the net remaining debt is about $153 million, and put on a net debt per capita, that's $238.15, or about 0.6% of SEV. And if you drop down a little bit more and consider the direct debt and the overlapping debt, you will see that we have a per capita net debt plus overlapping of $2,663, or about 6.3% of SEV. Any questions on that? If not, you look to page 21. One of the things I'd like to know is how fast we're going to repay our debt. Okay? And the typical measure is how much debt will be paid over the next 10 years, how much principal will be paid off. For us, in the year 2027, by that point, we should have paid off about $235.5 million in our debt. That's about 65.91% of the outstanding debt at this point. Now, that assumes we don't issue any additional debt and some other things like that. But given what's outstanding right now, that's how much we will have paid off in 10 years. Any questions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, Vice Chair Bolter.
Just a quick
We could
question on
turn
page.
to,
Steve, can I ask you a
Steve.
quick question? Just a quick question for comparison on page 20, the total 6.3%. How does that, just for fun, compare to other counties? I mean, is that way low? Is it about average?
you know, I've always kept track of ours and not looked with the overlapping debt. I will be happy to do that.
I just
I'm
wondered.
going to venture a guess, and it is purely a guess, that it is considered moderate.
Yep, okay.
Commissioner Bukowski.
Thank you, Steve. Real quick, on this chart, I know the folks in New York might not care, but, and I know it's further in the back, but still not enough detail. Do you have a chart, or does maybe somebody else on staff that like, what actually is under each of these lines? What did we buy with the capital improvement bonds, and just so that...
That would be me.
Okay, so I mean, if you could send us that chart, because again,
Yeah.
at one level, this is not enough detail, at least
Yeah.
for me. So thank you.
Two things you need to understand about debt. One, to issue debt, you have to do it, you have to be specifically enabled by law. So whether the laws are different under building authority versus revenue bonds versus CIB bonds. So that's the first thing. The second thing, when this board adopts a notice of intent, it lays out specifically what we have to, or what we are allowed to spend those funds for. And then it becomes our obligation in my office to make sure that we demonstrate that that's what we spent those bonds for. So yes, there's very detailed records that go into what we need to do. Periodically, we get a desktop audit from IRS. There's been 2 or 3 of them in the last 7 or 8 years. They make us jump through all kinds of hoops, proving that we spent those monies specifically as designated. And I can give you a recap, or if you have a specific question, I can get that for you.
Nothing specific, just a nice, simple chart would do, if you have such a thing.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We better, or I'm in big trouble. Okay, if we could go to page 24. This is one of those areas where numbers have changed, and I have the benefit of having additional information because in May, we got both the actuarial report and the GASB 68 report for the pension, and for the OPEB, we got the GASB 74 and 75 report along with the actual report in May. So I'm going to touch on both of these a little bit. I also would point out that since GASB 68 has been implemented, what we show on this page is a little different than what you were traditionally talking about. You got to remember 67 deals with the plan and the funding of the plan, and 68 deals now with the accounting requirements and how we show them on the government-wide statements. So this one, it really relates to the GASB 68 report. So if you look at the table in the middle, it talks about the planned fiduciary net position. For 2016, that net position is $788 million, and the net position, 2 columns over, as a percent of pension liabilities, 94.7%. Okay, that's cool, but what you're used to seeing is what's the funding ratio on the basis of the actuarial report. And so at this point, because I have the actuarial report, we are 98.8% funded now in the pension plan. And that relates to accrued liability of about $10.5 million. So we're real close to being 100% funded from that perspective. Now, we're also, the major difference between what we do actuarially versus what we do from the accounting perspective is what value of assets we use, okay? With the 68 report, we use the fair market value of the assets. And for the actuarial report, we use valuation assets. And valuation assets have been smooth because we know there's peaks and valleys in that particular area when we do the market return. So we smooth that over 5 years, I believe it is, and that can give you a different value. Sometimes valuation assets are higher than fair value, and sometimes they're lower. We are in a position right now, a good position, that fair value is higher than the valuation assets, okay? Because of that, and because GASB 68 uses the fair value when computing where we stand for spreading either the asset or the liability to the government-wide statement, we are, for GASB 78 purposes and for what we show on our financial statement, 104.3% funded. That can shift, particularly because you're riding on a market value. So far, what I've seen this year in the market in terms of both OPEB and our pension system, it's been pretty much flat across the board. Overall, I would say most communities are worried about showing a liability on their financial statement. This year, we'll be showing an asset. That could change next year, but it's a great place to be in. Questions? We turn to page 26. Down at the bottom, second paragraph on the bottom, it says, the funding status as of December 31, 2016, the plan was 36.4% funded. The unfunded accrued actual liability at that point is $34.3 million. A couple of things going on in OPEB. They have now put together what they call GASB 4 and 75, which means we're going to be on a comparable basis to how we're now accounting for the pension fund. Again, 74 will deal with the funding status of the plan. 75 will deal with the accounting portion of that. We also have that, as I said earlier, we also have that actuarial report and the GASB 75 report. Kent County chose to early implement. We will be a year ahead of what the requirements are. So our 2017 statements are in compliance with 74 and 75. As a result of that, on the actuarial side, we have, instead of the 36.4, we are now 47.8% funded in our OPEB, on our OPEB liability. The unfunded accrued liability is about $27.7 million.
Steve, on the OPEB, you started a program, I think, a year or two ago to try and pay that down. Are you going to continue that process to kind of get rid of that OPEB liability?
What about that? I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, I'm having...
We had a program where you started paying that liability.
Yes, we did.
We're going to continue that, right?
Yes. A couple of things. In 2007, we had zero funding, okay? We set up a BEBA trust, and with that BEBA trust, we started making contributions to it. And we were doing that for a number of years based on a 30-year open amortization schedule, which means you're like walking towards the wall. Theoretically, if you walked halfway and then halfway again, you never really reach the wall in theory. So what we did this past year, 2 years ago, we started voluntarily funding on a 25-year closed amortization period, which means you fund at 25 in the first year, 24 in the second year, always closed to get that narrowed down. Officially, the board adopted this year in November, as of 12/31/17, a 23-year, because we'd already done 2 years, a 23-year closed amortization period, and revised its assumed rate of return from 7.5 to 7, because it didn't look like where we are today in an analysis of the market we could continue to support a 7.5% assumed rate of return. I will say, since the inception that we have done very good against that mark. But things change. You want to be a little conservative on that. So because we have done all that, and furthermore, it's time for an experience study within the pension fund this year. And we're going to dovetail that with the OPEB fund because we share so much information together. And what we will do in that experience study, we'll go back in and look, how's our mortality table doing? If we gains and losses, should we adjust that? How's our assumed rate of return doing? Should we make adjustments to that? So that, again, is being proactive to making sure they're not being too liberal on how we're approaching the funding of this. And we are committed as a board, the VEBA board, to making sure that we pare that right down. I would tell you that the unfunded liability of $27.7 million would be the envy of the state. Any other questions on the OPEB liability? Well, now to the fun page, I guess. Page 34. Couple of things before we start page 34. And that is, even though 2017 says actual, still subject to audit. Some of those numbers will likely change. Do I think the magnitude will change? Do I think it will be significant to what the bottom line is? No. And so I'm going to say these are reasonably good numbers. They just may not be the exact number you see when the capital report comes out. I'd like to take a look, and as I do with New York, I'd like to do it with you, and that is go towards the to the bottom there, third line up from the bottom where it says net revenues and expenditures. For 2016 actual, that one is set. We had a surplus of revenues over expenditures of $461,000. If we look at 2017, we adopted a balanced budget. There were some minor adjustments during the year. That's why you see a budgetary fund balance of, or budgetary increase of about $40,000. But for actual, we're expecting a surplus of revenues over expenditures in the neighborhood of $1 million for this year. And of course, for 2018, we still show a balanced budget. As I like to do, working from top to bottom, taking a look at certain key categories and trying to explain what I find to be differences that catch my eye, and certainly differences that I think we need to explain to Wall Street. Every once in a while they'll ask about a different one, but generally they walk through this with us and are comfortable with what the presentation said. On taxes, it would be the first one I'd like to discuss, going down the left side on the revenue. I compare the 2017 budget of $88.8 million with an actual of $91.1 million, and a look at the budget of $92.8 million for 2018. Why we are trying to predict this well in advance of for the numbers being finally set. We work close with equalization. I don't spend my time trying to second guess the person that's out in the field working with those numbers. So we use the best number we have at that point in time. I think if you look back on page 15, as we've shown the growth in taxable value, it's been a little more than we expected, both at the equalization level and at my level. So I wanted to identify why that number went up. It's just plain, we've had better growth in taxable value than we anticipated at the time we had put these numbers together. Moving down to intergovernmental revenues, I highlighted the budget for 2017 with the actuals for 2017. And you can see that we went from 23.7 million to 25.5 million. This has been an interesting challenge. The Community Stabilization Fund has made payments to local units that have tax losses for personal property tax in excess of the losses, okay? The reason that has occurred in the past is that they are required to take a portion of that 2 cents from the use tax and levy or collect a set amount. And each year, they have a set amount that they have to do, and then they're required to distribute it. Well, when they get that set amount, pay all the losses that occurred, there's still money left. And they've been going back and reallocating that money to the local units. Okay, we got that in 2016. There was talk that they would make a change to it. Obviously, in 2017, they didn't make a change. But I did not feel it was prudent to put that in our revenue estimates when there was discussion of perhaps cutting back on that. So in 2017, we got about 3.7, 3.8 million, when in fact I felt we were entitled to approximately $2 million for that. So that has occurred. Right now, there is pending legislation to make that change for 2018. We'll see if it actually happens. But right now, we are still using the more conservative number in case they make that change. Always easier to accept more money than to come back and tell the board we have to make cuts because we were over-optimistic about the ability to collect those funds. That was pretty much on the revenue side, the things that I thought were significantly changed. Going down the expenditure side, the Sheriff's Department was one. If you look at the budget for the actuals, I said, say, for 2016, we're at about 56.8 million. And if you look at the actuals for 2017, we're forecasting $60.8 million. There's a combination of things that cost that. The Sheriff's Department, for 3 years, 17, 18, and 19, is facing a huge balloon of expected retirement. About 30% of our corrections officers and about 10% of our law enforcement officers are scheduled, can, and expected to retire. That will cause us to go through a significant hiring process. As I told New York, you just don't tap the first guy on the street and ask him if he'd like to be a corrections officer and give him a badge, whistle, gun, the key, and tell him to watch your prisoner. It takes a while to go out. It takes a while to go out and find qualified candidates. And then, after you find a qualified candidate, 6 months from the date they're hired, that's when we think we can turn them loose to do their job. In the interim, it's having people closely watch them, train them, on-the-job type thing. Just exactly what we want. We want these people doing their job properly. Unfortunately, we're short of staff. We have people who have to come in and monitor and mentor these folks. That's overtime. So that has put tremendous pressure on the budget for the last 2 years. We would expect some more of that probably in 2019, and then we would hope it level out to the next bubble 25 years down the road, which I'm promising I'll be retired by then. The second part of that is that we moved the payroll ending date back in order to give us more time to process payroll. And that has been a great move. It has relieved pressure tremendously. But I want to talk about the two things on how that works, okay? We tracked what it cost us to do that. We did not want to cause financial harm to our employees when we moved that back. And after a great deal of discussion and negotiation, we were able to pull that off. Okay? The cost of providing that week's pay was just about $1.1 million. Okay? That was everybody. Okay? The general fund portion of that, excuse me, I misspoke. The total to do that was about $1.8 million. The general fund portion was about $1.1 million. The sheriff's portion of that was about $500,000. Okay. That's what it costs. We know what it costs. It's behind it. What impacted the sheriff's expenses was not that. What impacted the sheriff's expenses was by moving that pay date back. Instead of accruing 1 week at the end of the year, we had to accrue 2 weeks, okay? Those were jobs where people worked. We would have paid it either way. We would have paid it either way. The only question was, what period did it properly belong in? Under the old system, with the pay ending date being a week newer, we would have put 1 week in 2018 and 1 week in 2017. No change in cost, but because we had to match those expenses up with the proper period, you ended up putting 2 weeks in there, and that put a big boost on that. So the final wage accrual was about 3.9 million because it was 2 weeks, almost 4 million right on, but and of that, about 2.4 of it was for the general fund. And a significant portion of that obviously was allocated to the sheriff's department as our major department. So those factors together show the wage and compensation and overall expenditures for the sheriff's department. Moving down a couple more, facilities management. That one I compare the 2017 actual at 13.9, almost 14 million, with 12.9 in the budget for 2018. As I hope you remember, we did a refunding of the 2007 Building Authority bonds and the 2008 CIB bonds, and we pulled them together and did it in one issue so that we could save cost of issuance. That saved us about $90,000. For us, it didn't matter whether they were CIB bonds or Building Authority bonds, because we had plenty of limit to be able to issue them as CIB bonds. So we packaged them together, put them as one. When you have a Building Authority bond, the Building Authority owns the building until it's paid off. And then they support that by having a lease to pay for the rent on that particular building. Because the bonds were paid off, the initial bonds were paid off with the refunding proceeds, the Building Authority no longer owns that building, it comes back to us. So we reduced the lease payments that were budgeted in Al's budget to make that 10. And when I get down lower, I'll show you where we had to increase our payments out to handle the debt service. The bottom line of that is, though, by doing that, we saved, about $80,000 a year on the CIB bonds and about $255,000 a year for the Building Authority bond. Good move, save money on an annual basis, save money by pulling those two together. Information technology. I compare three of them. We got the budget for 2017 at about 7.7 million. We have the actual for 2017 at 6.3 million, and then we have the budget for 2018 at 7.7 million. Part of our software requires us to make an annual licensing payment, which is usual with software. You never own software, you license it. Okay, for us, it's it's about $944,000 for the 3 packages. Okay, starting in year, we funded this project originally in the CIP fund. Starting with year 3, we were going to move, and did move, the payment of the licensing fee to IT. Our auditors balked at that. They felt that that was more of a debt issue rather than a operating cost. So they said, no, you got to pull that back in down with your CIP and do it through that process. So we knew that was coming in 17. As part of the audit, we made that adjustment in 17. So again, I will show you down below where the offset is for that particular change. And then in 2018, we will need to make that adjustment, but we haven't done it from the budget that we have out there, the original budget. So you will see a similar adjustment. So I would expect, once we make that adjustment, 2018 expenditures will be much more in line with what you see with the actual for 2017. Now, going down to get the flip side of those quarters, if we look at transfers out CIP, the same thing has occurred. We made the adjustment. If you take a look at the budget, it was $6.2 million. Actual ended up being $7.1 million. That's because we have now pulled that $944,000 licensing fee down there and are making that payment from there. If you go down to transfers out debt service, you will see a similar behavior. You will see that we have a budget of $887. We have actuals of $883. But in 18, we know we're going to have to make that change to bring it back down there. And so we will have that number climb when we go into there.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Steve, could you provide for me a summary, a subsidiary account summary of the child care, the $16 million child care fund and the CIP? Do you have a summary of the subsidiary report that I can look at?
Yeah, we can put something.
Summary, not every line item, just a summary of the subsidiary?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We break these numbers down in great deal of.
I don't need all of them.
Yeah. We probably process 500,000 transactions a year.
No.
We try to get them up
Yeah.
into a readable form.
Again, just the summary of the subsidiary,
Yep, we'll get
so
them
I
for
can
you,
see,
sir. Absolutely.
like the summary of the summary.
Make that available to all of us.
Of course.
Okay, the last thing I want to say on this page is kind of focus on the last line, fund balance at the end of the year. Based on what we see for actuals for 2017, we're expecting fund balance to be $70,600,000. Okay? That sounds wonderful, except our minimum fund balance, when you calculate it, should be about $71.5 million. So we're actually a little over $900,000 underfunded in our 40% requirement for fund balance, even with that $1 million surplus that we're generating in 2017. If you look at the policy, it says we, for a shortage of that magnitude, that we are committed to eradicating it in the next subsequent year.
Steve, we get Commissioner Talon.
Just quickly, Steve, could you also give us an outline of that analysis? Because when I just did the numbers, it came out very differently. So if you could show us how we're underfunded.
What you need to do is, when we get to the point, because we still don't have the audit, it's like I told you when we originally adopted the policy, our best measure is that point in time. But what you got to do for calculating what the minimum fund balance requirement is that it's the total budget that we have adopted, plus the transfers out to the other departments, because we're putting cash in there. And when you do that and multiply that times the 40%, I come up with at least preliminarily 71.5. And I can provide you those numbers too, if you need them.
Commissioner Antor.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, when we get that little hiccup at the end, does that affect the fact, will we still be considered structurally balanced, our budget?
Could you slow down this bit?
Are we still considered as a structurally balanced budget after
We
making
are
that correction?
focused on that for this next year, okay? I mean, we have adopted that. We continue to make that our goal when we set up the budget targets and for everybody to get there. But yes, we are committed to doing that. Right now, the last 2 years, we've been fortunate enough, or last 4 actually, to generate moderate surpluses. This one will be the largest surplus we've had in a number of years for 2017. We're still focused on having a balanced budget. We will be taking a closer look at that when we come to you at budget time. We will go in and tell you what we think 2018 will actually generate coming in. And we also have updated numbers for 17 or final numbers from the audit. So you should be able to take a look at that. In general, we have seen expenditures rising a little bit, but that shouldn't be considered unusual. Why there are some predominant facts on some general things. I can't address all those today, there's just too much happening. But I think, you know, for the years of 2008, 9, 10, 12, 13, we were in a cutback mode. We cut back staff, we cut back opportunities to buy things that we needed. We delayed replacing that computer from 3 years to 4 years. We did a lot of things like that, so we had some pent-up demand. When we started seeing a little improvement in resources as we set the targets for departments, we try to put enough money into so that we can start getting back on a regular cycle. There's been a pent-up demand for various things within various departments, vehicle replacement, things like that, things that were non-mission critical, but in a well-run organization should be addressed a little more frequently. So just that has caused the general rise in the level of expenditures. Obviously, we also have done the same thing on the CIP fund. We have put a little more money in the CIP fund to deal with some of these issues that were necessary and important, but not mission critical that day versus laying off some other people. Now we're able to do a little bit more with the blessing of the board when we adopt the budget.
So, in summary,
That's a great
we had a structurally balanced budget in 17 and ended in the black, so that there are no deficits. Yeah.
Just looking ahead.
Yep, and that's what we're planning to do again in 18.
Thank you.
And then, unless there's more questions on that, I would just throw a few more things out there. This book also has several attachments. It has all the key financial policies in it. And so the rating agencies know what our policies are. They are updated on a regular basis. They, in general, respond well to our policies. They think they're well-written, and more importantly, they like the fact that we adhere to them. And then, on the back of that, we have some articles that of important developments in Kent County to show that we're not the Rust Belt, that we have a lot of activity going on, a lot of positive activity. Those articles, again, help support the message that we're delivering to New York. If we borrow money, we intend to pay it back, and we have the ability to pay it back.
Thank you for that thorough report. Just for the commissioner's sake, this is real similar to the type of report we walk through in New York when we go to the bond rating agency meetings. Any final questions for Steve?
Thank you, and thank you for your support.
All right, thank you. We then move to public comment and invite anyone forward that wants to speak. We have 3 minutes per person. We would ask that they state their name and address. Good morning.
Good morning. I just made my comments from 5 minutes to 3 minutes because I don't want to duplicate what you've already heard.
Sure.
My name is Lori Gardner. I am a longtime resident of the city of Grand Rapids, 47 years, and evidently today I'm the historian as well. And I'm here to speak on behalf of our children and our families, just as I was 23 years ago. Perhaps Commissioner Voorhees remembers, because I think we're the only two people who were here then. In 1995, 23 years ago, I stood before this body of elected officials seeking and receiving full county commission endorsement of the document, Our Children, Our Future. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it. It looked like this. Similarly, I received the endorsement of the governing boards of all of the municipalities in Kent County. For those of you who are not familiar, this document was the summation of 2 years of planning and literally months and months of input from citizens from the inner city to our rural areas, every walk of life, and every corner of Kent County. 35 focus groups, 3,000 pages of transcript became the 15 standards in this document that inspired the creation of and became the framework for the things that you may be familiar with: the Office of Children, Youth, and Families, the Kent County Family and Children Coordinating Council, the Kent County Early Childhood Plan, the Great Start Collaborative, and it laid the foundation for the continuing work of Family Futures, as well as the creation of the Early Childhood Commission and the First Steps organization, among other critical initiatives supporting many of our children and families. As the co-consultant who facilitated this extensive countywide process and wrote these standards based on community input, I find it both encouraging and rewarding to see all of these initiatives that have transpired over time. However, at the same time, and as you have heard today and received information in your packets about both kids count and the gap analysis, it does not substantiate the hoped-for improvements for all of our children. Not for a shortage of ideas or attempts to improve the systems or coordinate the services, but from a lack of the capacity and adequate and sustained resources to do so. Over these past 2+ decades, and dare I state that as a quarter of a century, the county commissioners thankfully have periodically supported these initiatives with the allocation of some funding. But given the evidence-based data before us, it is simply not enough nor sustainable, and specifically per the proposal before you, to fully address the critically important stages of 0 to 3 years old. So I ask the following: how many more generations are we going to fail as a result of our lack of will or our failure to respond to the ever-growing body of research and data that strongly underscores the urgency, the critical importance, and the cost-effectiveness of putting these supports in place today? More than a whole generation has already gone by since the community spoke loudly and consistently about what needs to be in place for the well-being of all of our children, not just some of them. We really cannot afford to wait any longer. Today, 23 years later and a lot more gray hair, I'm here once again asking for your endorsement in the form of immediate approval to put this before the voters of Kent County in November and let them decide and have the opportunity to see the standards that they voiced so long ago become a reality for our young children and families. This proposal would allow Kent County the opportunity to lead both the county as well as the entire state on how to successfully sustain critical early childhood services and support systems. I don't think our children can wait any longer. They've been waiting a long time. Thank you for your attention to this and your advocacy for this.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment this morning? Please come forward, state your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, William Mosqueda, 127 River Road, Sparta, Michigan, 49345. Yeah, so you all know me as the official scribe that records these meetings for posterity, and I am here today as a duly designated representative of GRTV to remind everyone that the first weekend of June, June 1, 2, and 3, is Festival of the Arts, and GRTV will be live in the plaza broadcasting it, and we are in need of volunteers. The positions include running the cameras, being a director, running the graphics computers, being on our street team, and there is absolutely no experience needed. We can train you, we can show you what to do. It is a very fun time, and I encourage everyone here to sign up if they want to. You can go on our website, grcmc.org/grtv. We've got a Festival of the Arts tab up there with all of our information. You can call us, you can talk to me, you can come in person, whatever you want to do. We'd just love to have you there. What else? Yeah, I think that's it. So tell your constituents, sign up yourselves, and everybody watching the live stream, you're free to sign up too. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That was awesome. That was the
Any other public comment this morning? I do not see any, so we will move then to agenda item 7, which is our consent agenda, and I will call on Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the consent agenda.
Support.
Support by Commissioner Vonk. This is a roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the motion to adopt the consent agenda, Commissioner Antor.
Yes.
Vice Chair Bolter.
Yes.
Commissioners Brevy.
Yes.
Bulkowski.
Yes.
Hennessy. Jones. Coleman.
Yes.
Korndike.
Yes.
Mast. Melton.
Yes.
Morgan.
Yes?
Ponstein.
Yes.
Skaggs.
Yes.
Steck.
Yes?
Allen. Yes. Funk.
Yes.
Voorhees.
Yes.
Womack.
Yes.
Chair Salfeld.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 17 yeas, 0 nays. The motion passes. The consent agenda is adopted.
Thank you. We move to agenda item 8. We have one resolution for which I will call on Commissioner Mast.
Thank you, Chair. The single resolution we have is a motion to adopt a recommendation by the Finance Committee to give some permission to the Drain Commissioner to establish a maintenance and improvement district at the request of the people who are going to be taxed. So I move Resolution 1835.
Support?
Support by Commissioner Korndike. Questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Talon.
Just a quick one. I think this is a great use of unassigned fund balance in that it's a win-win, that we're gaining additional interest revenue income and saving the Drain Commission and the citizens. So kudos, it's great use of our resources. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I see none. This is a roll call vote. I'll call on Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, on the motion to adopt Resolution 524-1835, Commissioner Antor.
Yes.
Vice Chair Bolter.
Yes.
Commissioners Brevy.
Yes.
Bulkowski.
Yes.
Hennessy. Jones. Coleman.
Yes.
Korndike.
Yes.
Mast.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Morgan.
Yes?
Ponstein.
Yes.
Skaggs.
Yes.
Steck.
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Vonk.
Yes.
Voorhees.
Yes.
Womack.
Yes.
Chair Salfeld.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 17 yeas, 0 nays. The motion passes. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you. We move then to agenda item 9, which is our 1-minute public comment. Is there any additional public comment today? We do have one item. You have 1 minute.
1 minute, here we go. Good morning, Chair Salfeld, Commissioners. I'm Mike Gustweiler with the West Michigan Sports Commission. I reside at 53 Rockview Drive in Rockford, Michigan. Just very quickly want to thank the commissioners that were able to attend our 12th annual luncheon with our guest speaker, John Beeline, the head coach for the U of M men's basketball team. More importantly, we were able to recognize Wayman Britt and Matthew Van Zetten with the heavy lifting that they did in really getting this organization off the ground over 10 years ago. So we thank them for all that they've meant to this organization. Secondly, you should have received an invite in your email boxes for our upcoming 9th edition of our summer games for the Myer State Games of Michigan. We'd love for all of you to come to the opening ceremonies, 40 sports, over 8,000 athletes from across the state will compete, and we're very excited for that. And then lastly, we're in the 4th season of the Art Van Sports Complex. It's in full swing, pardon the pun, but it is going well. We're getting into the period of June and July where we'll see as many as 100 teams, and that amounts to over 3,000 participants and spectators that will be at the complex each weekend. So I'd encourage you, if you'd like to come out, I would be happy to give you a tour, buy you a hot dog. So just reach out to me, and I'd love for you to see that activity out there. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to confirm that opening, I just entered it in my calendar. It's on June 22nd. I think it was at 6:45. Is that right?
6:30.
6:30.
At East
Okay.
Kentwood High School.
Okay,
June
great.
20 what?
June 22nd. It's a Friday. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? I see none, so we will move to reports. Commissioner Korndike.
Thank you, Chair Saltzman. If everyone would please turn to page 9 of your economic outlook report. I'm kidding. I just put it away. Anyway, one thing I wanted to point out very quickly, it talks about air travel. And the last bullet point on that report is $500 million of annual economic activity is generated by our airport. That's a lot of economic activity. That's a really good thing to have happening. And just so everyone knows, the airport is now working hard on trying to develop the area around the airport for more economic activity, for leasing space for businesses to come in and develop some of that property, generate even more revenue for the airport and the county. So good things happening at the airport. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any other reports? Commissioner Stack.
You know, I swore I was not going to go after Commissioner Korndike ever again, and here I am. So a couple of items. Yeah, first of all, just a reminder that the Dedicated Millage Subcommittee is meeting on June 5, right after the Finance Committee. So if you are interested in participating by way of attending, certainly if you have thoughts, pass through to the committee members. That would be helpful. And then second, my usual report with respect to the Lakeshore Regional Entity. The final submissions have been submitted to the state in the exchanges with them over the issue of whether or not they pull the contract with the PIHP in this region. We are told that we will get a final response from them no later than this week. So we'll know more Friday.
Very good. Commissioner Mast.
Well, I'll do it on reports, I guess. I just want to acknowledge that several of us were at last Friday's community gathering for behavioral health issues, and it was a good session to participate in because there's several sources of funding for behavioral health services in our community. Network 180 is the public funded program, but there's lots of private financial insurances and so forth, and so as a community, we need to look at solving this together, and so that was kind of the biggest part there. Relative to Network 180 board, we received Monday night at our board meeting the special preliminary report by the Crisis Center Task Force that was appointed last November. I think I'm going to ask that be distributed to all the county commissioners because there's lots of good data in there. We tasked that committee, that task force, to continue working on now explaining that to other stakeholders, getting further reaction, and then I think developing some requests for information as to how some parts of that can be implemented. It's not something that can move quickly, but we do have a crisis in terms of mental health services for people who are in crisis. So we'll get a chance to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other reports? I do not see any, so we will move to agenda item 11, miscellaneous. Commissioner Mast, I'll start with you. Yeah.
You see, I think you all got an invitation from Captain Paul Ryan, who was the commander of the Veterans Council of Kent County. We are sponsoring a parade on the real Memorial Day, which is Wednesday, May 30 at 6 o'clock, 6:30, I think, starting. I know a couple of us are going to be going in there. We have a proclamation that Commissioner Vonk and myself helped put together, and Commissioner So I will be presenting that, but you're invited to attend that. And this This time is particularly special, I think, because the city of Grand Rapids has undergone quite a bit of change in the Veterans Park downtown, and there's going to be a little special dedication for that. It's a time that we as a community can get together and honor our veterans. And thank you very much, Colonel, for the prayer. So there are a couple of us. We'd like to invite more. I think Ted's going to ride his motorcycle. And if it's just the two of us, I will ride with him. Otherwise, I will walk.
Ladies first, you know.
Ladies first, absolutely.
Sidecar, right?
It's a nice walk, and he gets a lot of attention with his pretty motorcycle. I think we got signs going to go on this time, right? Yeah, great. So we'll be there representing the county, but be nice to
Excellent.
others. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to briefly explain the worksheet that you have in front of you that might have been a little mysterious. That was information from page 34 of that financial overview that we had there. I added a column to show what the history of those various departments were. I found it very interesting numbers, and just want to ask that as we go through the budgeting process coming up, that we take a look at some of those percentages of change in those departments and how they compare between departments. Some of them are very high, some are very low. Steve gave us some background on some of them, but just ask that we, perhaps staff tweak this and help us take a look at some of those comparisons. Thank
Is
you.
this I didn't get that. Did everybody get a copy of
apologize.
this?
Yeah, I missed you.
Okay. And this is something that you put together?
Yeah, but it's based, most of it is the numbers off of page 34.
Okay, all right, very good. Commissioner Breivy.
Chair, as many of you may have heard, there's been a little bit of news down in Gaines Township. I'm pretty excited about an Amazon fulfillment center coming to the district. 1,000 jobs, $150 million in investment from Amazon. I think it's pretty cool. It's kind of a snowball effect, I think, from when we approved Switch a few years ago. And there's just been a lot more growth, a lot more interest in the area. So I just wanted to, say thanks to the Right Place for the work that they've been doing in our community, the Gaines Township Board, and also the MEDC for supporting this type of activity. I think will be really neat to see the improvements that are made. It's going to be some growing pains, I'm sure, but I think it's a great opportunity for Gaines Township and really puts us on the map. So come visit. It's a great place.
Were you interviewed?
I
by the
was.
press? Okay.
Yep, I was on Fox
Good.
for that.
Commissioner Melton.
Chair, just kind of to piggyback on what Commissioner Mast had to say, Memorial Day is a day that the Meltons at least take very seriously, and I guess at risk of seeming a little bit emotional, I think too often we think of it as times together with our family for hot dogs and hamburgers, and it is a very good reason to do. But freedom doesn't come free. Freedom comes with a price. Some of us know that very closely firsthand. We have some of our vets right here on our board, and there are not enough ways for those of us who sit here and can go anywhere that we want in the United States for the most part and feel very good about it. We can never thank you enough. There's just not enough words, and so I think I speak for an awful lot of people that sometime throughout the day on Monday, which is the day that we've decided as a nation that will be our Memorial Day, that we really do think about what it is that it means to be serving here for our constituents, but more importantly, what it means to have a chance to go to where we want to go to school, where we want to worship, who we want to worship, whether we want to worship or not, that we can do that because there are those who have given of life, limb, and just time away from their family, and so many who will not be here with their families to have the hot dogs and the hamburgers that the rest of us can have. So I'll leave it at that, but just know that those of you who are listening and might be listening, and certainly those of you who have served, there are many, most of us who are so very, very grateful. Your courage to step forward and do the right thing is is just overwhelming, and I thank you for that. And those who are traveling, such as I, and maybe that's why I'm so emotional, I am soon to get in a U-Haul truck in the middle of a bench seat with my son and my husband. I am moving my baby to Denver, so perhaps that's why I'm a little bit more emotional today than usual, but safe travel over the Memorial Day.
Thank you. Commissioner Skaggs.
Two things real quick. One, it's the season for graduation, so congratulations to all the high school and college graduates, including my own daughter, Lainey Skaggs, graduating from high school. Good luck, everyone. Try to stay in Michigan, and be sure to register to vote now that you're presumably 18 years old, or getting close to it by the election. The other thing, of course, is we had some disturbing news out of Washington, I think, 10 days ago. It appears from news releases that the White House and the EPA are blocking the release of an assessment on PFAS from the Agency on Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. That's the famous ATSDR. That appears to indicate that PFAS is dangerous at far more lower levels than previously considered. Probably about 1/6 of those levels, so instead of 70 parts per trillion, probably something more like 10 to 12, which is in line with other studies that are public and in line with the new New Jersey law. I think we all know what's going on with PFAS in this county, and I think we all can be proud at the work that the county and its various agencies have done. Being on the DPW board, I know that the DPW has done the absolute right thing by families that are living near the old 10-mile landfill. We are giving support, information, bottled water, and eventually well filters to every family that has detectable levels of PFAS. Obviously, we know the county commission has added additional staff, and the health department is doing a great job. That being said, we might be doing a great job on the wrong level that's not scientifically accurate with the best and most recent available evidence. So I think we need to act quickly. Time is of the essence for human health here. Obviously, one of our key tasks as a county is to deal with public health. So I would urge staff in this commission to think about in the coming weeks to join Governor Snyder's Michigan PFAS Action Response Team in part and calling for the release of the ATSDR study so we can be working with the best available science. I think we need to work to start with Wolverine Worldwide to make sure that they are following the same precautionary measures that the DPW is following. That is to make sure that families that have less than 70 but have a detectable amount of PFAS are being informed by that. And I believe that we should insist that Wolverine Worldwide do the same thing that DPW is doing as far as bottled water and well water filters at either detectable levels or 12 or 10 or 5 or whatever it is that this report comes out with. Want to applaud the work of the state in helping us out on this with funding, but I think just to summarize that it's important that we're dealing with the best scientific evidence on this issue, which is affecting us here at home and which we all know about, but which is a national issue that I think we must act aggressively on. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Antor.
Thank you, Chair. First, Commissioner Melton, dittos. Well said. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about PFAS myself. I was unable to make our last meeting, which was our evening meeting, because there was a PFAS meeting up in Algoma Township with some of the residents up there. And I've been going door to door in Algoma Township specifically and talking to people and just seeing if there's anything that we could help with or if there's some information they're lacking. And the response has been really, really encouraging. I think the people up there, they're extremely reasonable. They kind of understand what's happened, how this whole thing is kind of new to everybody. The science is incomplete. I think they know that the county, the health department, and even Wolverine, quite honestly, a lot of people were really happy with Wolverine's response until it started getting kind of litigious. But I think Wolverine's installed over 400 full health systems. They continue to provide water for families that have any detectable readings, at least in Algoma Township. And the people there are rightfully concerned. I mean, it's scary. I happen to own a piece of property right across the street from the Pearson landfill. So I've been directly impacted by that because they now have PFAS. And I think they're finding PFAS pretty much all over the state. But I really wanted to do a shout out to our health department and our DPW. And even the DEQ, I think we're all working together very well. The DEQ did a really good presentation last week at that meeting. And I wanted to let people know that some of the news agencies think that those meetings are inappropriate because Algoma's taking neighborhood by neighborhood. I applaud Algoma Township for doing it that way. Because otherwise, what we've seen when they have a huge open house where anybody can come in, those meetings are not very productive. A lot of people end up leaving before they get all the information. So I really would like to encourage Algoma to continue to do those types of meetings. There's a lot of information out there on our website. If you have any questions, they're posting hotline numbers and links all the time and updating. So I'm really encouraged by that. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out that I think we're all over it, and I'm really proud of the county's efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Salfeld. Just a few things. I really appreciate the work of the millage subcommittee. I've been at the last two meetings, and you guys are thorough, asking a lot of questions, so my hats off to Commissioners Skaggs, Breeve, Mast, and Stan for chairing that. Education is a big issue, and my long tenure as a school board member, I often advocated, education operates in these silos, and they're very protective of their money, what they do. You do this, we'll do that. Education starts at conception, and it goes till you die. And there are so many things in there that we've got to change the way we look at education, and how we begin education, and how we continue it after the structured silo's done with them. The other thing, on my way in this morning, I almost saw a pedestrian hit by a car. Today's cars, there are so many things going on inside the car. There's a lot of things going on outside the car. We've got a lot of detours, it seems, not only just sharing the roads with pedestrians, motorcycles, bicyclists. Just shout out to people, just pay attention. There's a lot going on, and that car you're behind is a deadly weapon. I also want to just mention Amazon. I think it's a reminder of what business taxes are. Seems like every company that comes to Michigan or anywhere in the Great Lakes, there's tax incentives just to get the company to come here. Now, I know that's the way business is done, and we're competing against other states, so I don't have anything bad to say about that process at this time, but we've got to look in this state on how business taxes are structured. We can't be picking winners and losers. I welcome the 1,000 jobs, I welcome Amazon, but for some people, they think this is the cure-all, and Amazon's got the answer for every problem in America. I just want to remind Amazon that we've got a lot of distribution and fulfillment centers in this county already. 3 of them that come to mind is Spartan Nash, Gordon Food Service, Meyer Incorporated. Those companies have been in Kent County for a long time, have supported a lot of the causes, a lot of the projects, and a lot of times not under the name of their company. So I welcome Amazon. I welcome you to join in the examples that those companies and other companies have done to make Kent County the county that you looked at and said, yeah, this is the place we want to locate. And then lastly, a couple weeks ago, I had an invite from the Department of Natural Resources, the Michigan State University Biology Department, and Sturgeon for tomorrow to go up to Onaway, Michigan, up in Sheboygan, to tour the hatchery up there. It's really been a success story. I don't know if anyone knows a lot about sturgeon. It's an endangered species. Probably 2 decades ago, they were down to a couple hundred in the state. Well, the population in Black Lake is now at about 1,500. There's a lot of people. This is an example in a rural part of our state where people came together. The hatchery was built. A lot of people said what we needed was better habitat. Well, there's a hydro dam at the one end of it. So the hydro dam built the hatchery for MSU to study and do a rearing facility right on the river. They also control the flow to encourage the breeding season in the spring. So you've got a lot of different people working together to do a lot of different things. So anyone ever wants to tour it, I know there's a couple dates during the year where they open up the hatchery. It's very eye-opening, and one of the biggest threats now, besides habitat for the sturgeon, is the caviar industry. And during this time of the year, there are people that are watching the river along with the Department of Resource officers to protect that. Just to put it into perspective, some of these can weigh up to 100 pounds. A female at 100 pounds has probably got a value in caviar alone of about $40,000. So it's quickly an easy pick if you're a poacher of something to look at. Luckily, the DNR has said there hasn't been one poached there for probably 8 years. So I wanted to do a shout out for the invite up there. It was very educational, and as county commissioners, we did sometimes unique events to go to, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Korndike.
Pass.
Vice Chair Bolter.
Thanks, I'll be really quick. Just a couple of things. I want to echo what Commissioner Melton said about Memorial Day. It's on all of our hearts, and we appreciate anyone who sacrificed for our country. Secondly, I want to acknowledge Mary Swanson's work here at the county. You know, she's not physically here today, but she did give 20-plus years of public service to us, and I understand she will be leaving our service, and I want to just acknowledge that time that she spent here and all that she did. And lastly, I did get a call from a constituent in Caledonia, a little upset about our process at the zoo in terms of school children visiting and the free entry that all of our Kent County youngsters are supposed to be receiving. It was a tough process for them. They ended up going through that process and starting to pay, and then finding out later they didn't have to pay. I did talk to Commissioners Voorhees and Hennessy. They were right on it. The zoo staff was right on it. They got right back to me. It seems like there's still some kinks still being worked out in that process, so we need to always continually remind people that they are now paying for this service, and admission is free for Kent County children. So I want to just again reiterate that and acknowledge the zoo staff for getting back to me so quickly. Thank you.
Commissioner Bolkowski.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief forewarning of more conversation down the road about our inability to get from here to the new Amazon or to the Art Van Fields by public transportation, or people in Caledonia to get to the zoo by public transportation. In 1993, the Citizens Action put out a study, and then by far the number one recommendation in 1993 was countywide public transportation. We continue to have, at best, a patchwork system that is so limited, age, geography, all kinds of stuff. And even in the rapid service area, you can't get to where you need to get. So we got a lot of work to do there. I'll be quiet now. I could go on. Have a great Memorial Day. And congratulations to City High, where my son Liam and his 84 classmates graduated.
I will close with a comment by Wayman Britt.
Yeah, just to echo the sentiments by Vice Chair Bolter about Mary Swanson. She's today at Mako Conference at Crystal Mountain, where I was at yesterday afternoon, all day actually. And just wanted to say that, after my 15 years working with the county, we did a lot of great things together, working on various projects, and Mary did a really wonderful job on key critical projects for the county. Please make sure, she did not want to have a big fanfare, here at the board meeting or anything like that, but I would say to you, she's quite, that's Mary. She didn't want that. But please reach out to her if you have the time, cards, those kinds of things. We did have a nice party with her, the staff did, last week, celebrated her time with us, had a great time, got her a real nice gift and so forth. So just make sure you recognize her. One more thing, we are closing in on finalizing our selection of our communications and public relations person. I think you will be well pleased. We just have to go through some background checks and some things, very, very key role for the county. I'll be a part of the executive team and making sure that your communication is really great, as well as the office here. So you will be very pleased, I think. And then the other thing, we're going to make some changes with Mary leaving. We're going to make a few changes in the office in terms of how we're structured. We've got a strong staff, of course, with Matthew Van Zetten, Sandra Ghostin-Jones, and Elliot Nelson, who's here, of course, our legal team, and Pam Van Kuren in the board office. We feel very strong. We're going to make a couple of other changes. You will see a new face in our team, but I'll wait to announce that here soon. So just want to let you know we are thinking about you and making sure that you are served well, as we've always done. So just wanted to make that comment.
Good. You've been a chatty bunch today, but we are up to item 12, and I will call on Commissioner Voorhees for a motion to adjourn.
I would like to talk about another incident. They mentioned about 20, what the young lady said, I was here 25 years ago. But I wasn't. I was in the state legislature at that
Jim
time.
Talon was here, by the way.
And I had black hair, too.
Would you please,
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Support. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.
I am Kent County. I am Kent County.
I am Kent County.
We are 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 Kent County.
Bayard, Kent County. Ami, Kent County.
Somos, Kent County.
Mas Ira, Kent County.
We are Kent County.
We are Kent County.
We are Kent County. Oh yeah.